Well, well, my fear-loving fiends. Welcome back to Survival Horror Ambience, your nightly broadcast from the darker side of the dial. I'm your host of hauntings, your master of macabre moons, here to bring you another tale soaked in screams and sleepless nights. If you're new to the channel, creep on that like button till it screams, and subscribe so you never miss another broadcast from Survival Horror Ambience. We've got plenty more nightmares on the way, and they're dying to meet you. Now, without further ado, we call this little bedtime horror The Eyes in the Closet.
Tonight's story comes from a house where silence had a sound of its own. Private Eli Mercer, 24, newly stationed at Fort North, hadn't slept right in weeks. Maybe it was the cold, maybe it was the dreams. Or maybe it was that damn closet across from his bed. Every night, the same thing. He'd close his eyes and the door would creak just enough to show the dark inside. A perfect rectangle of black that seemed to breathe when he did. Jesus, it's just the heater. Every old base groans, right? The barracks were mostly empty that night. His roommate had been transferred to the city for medical checks, leaving Eli alone with the hum of the radiator and the whisper of his own heartbeat. He tried to drift off, counting breaths, counting the seconds between gusts of wind. That's when he heard it. Soft, wet, almost like fabric sliding against itself from the closet. Hello? Who's there? His mouth went dry. The room didn't feel cold anymore. It felt hollow. He swung his legs out of bed, grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, and aimed it at the closet. The door was half open, same as always. Inside, nothing but uniforms, boots, and the faint smell of detergent. Yeah, sure. Closet ghosts, real funny, Eli. He closed the door, clicked off the light, and lay back down. Sleep finally came, fitful, shallow, and that's when he felt it. Something pressing on his chest, not heavy at first, just enough to make his ribs creak. His eyes snapped open. He couldn't move. He couldn't even scream. The thing loomed above him, darker than the dark, covered in eyes that blinked without sound. 100 tiny mirrors staring down at him, watching him suffocate. And just as suddenly, it was gone. He sat up, gasping, the taste of blood in his mouth. The room was silent. Only the closet door, now wide open, swayed on its hinges like it had been nudged by an unseen hand. Eli didn't sleep again that night. He sat in bed till morning, flashlight on, watching that door. The snow outside kept falling, thick, endless, and white, but in his room, the dark had learned his name. Tonight's story comes from a house where silence had a sound of its own. Private Eli Mercer, 24, newly stationed at Fort North, hadn't slept right in weeks. Maybe it was the cold, maybe it was the dreams, or maybe it was that damn closet across from his bed. Every night, the same thing. He'd close his eyes and the door would creak just enough to show the dark inside. A perfect rectangle of black that seemed to breathe when he did. Jesus, it's just the heater. Every old base groans, right? The barracks were mostly empty that night. His roommate had been transferred to the city for medical checks, leaving Eli alone with the hum of the radiator and the whisper of his own heartbeat. He tried to drift off, counting breaths, counting the seconds between gusts of wind. That's when he heard it. Soft, wet, almost like fabric sliding against itself from the closet. Hello? Who's there? His mouth went dry. The room didn't feel cold anymore. It felt hollow. He swung his legs out of bed, grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, and aimed it at the closet. The door was half open, same as always. Inside, nothing but uniforms, boots, and the faint smell of detergent. Yeah, sure. Closet ghosts, real funny, Eli. He closed the door, clicked off the lights, and lay back down. Sleep finally came, fitful, shallow. And that's when he felt it. Something pressing on his chest, not heavy at first, just enough to make his ribs creak. His eyes snapped open. He couldn't move. He couldn't even scream. The thing loomed above him, darker than the dark, covered in eyes that blinked without sound. 100 tiny mirrors staring down at him, watching him suffocate. And just as suddenly, it was gone. He sat up, gasping, the taste of blood in his mouth. The room was silent. Only the closet door, now wide open, swayed on its hinges like it had been nudged by an unseen hand. Eli didn't sleep again that night. He sat in bed till morning, flashlight on, watching that door. The snow outside kept falling, thick, endless, and white. But in his room, the dark had learned his name.
Well, now, wasn't that divine intervention? Poor Eli found religion in the worst way. If you enjoyed tonight's tale of terror, give it a like, share it with your fellow night owls, and subscribe so you don't miss the next broadcast from Survival Horror Ambience. We've got plenty more nightmares on the way, and they're dying to meet you. Until next time, my creepy companions, keep your closets closed and your eyes wide open.
I never used to lock my doors during the day. I grew up in a small town in Louisiana, the kind of place where you knew your neighbors, and strangers stood out. Bad things happened elsewhere. Not here. That changed on a sweltering afternoon in July 2002. I was home alone, folding laundry in the living room, when I heard a knock at the door. Not a polite tap, but a slow, deliberate knocking, the kind that immediately made my stomach tighten. I wasn't expecting anyone. Peeking through the window, I saw a man standing on my porch. He wasn't someone I recognized. average height, dark eyes, a build that suggested he worked with his hands. He was dressed casually, nothing that immediately set off alarm bells. Still, something about him felt wrong. I hesitated before opening the door. A part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, but before I could decide, he knocked again. Louder this time. I swallowed hard and cracked the door just enough to poke my head out. "Can I help you?" The man smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Yeah, sorry to bother you," he said. "My car broke down just up the road. I was hoping I could use your phone." Something about the way he spoke felt off. The words were polite, but there was an edge to them, like he was testing me. I hesitated, glancing toward the road. From where I stood, I couldn't see a car. I don't know why, but my gut screamed at me to lie. "Sorry, I don't have a phone." His smile faltered for half a second before he nodded. "No problem. Just thought I'd ask." I forced a tight smile and pushed the door closed, but before I could latch it, his hand shot out, catching the edge. "Wait," he said, his voice a little too eager now. "Could I at least get a glass of water?" Panic surged through me. I pushed against the door, but he was strong. The gap between us was barely an inch, but I could see the shift in his expression. The polite mask was slipping, replaced by something hungry. That's when I realized he had no reason to be here. There was no broken-down car, no real request. Just a man trying to get inside. And I was alone. My heart slammed against my ribs. The door was still cracked open, his fingers curling around the edge like a vice. I shoved against it with all my weight, but he pushed back. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to force his way inside. Then, a noise. It wasn't loud, just the sound of footsteps in the hallway. But it was enough. He froze, his eyes flicking past me, like he was reassessing the situation. I didn't dare look away, but I knew who it was. My son. He had just come home. The man's grip loosened just slightly, and in that instant, I slammed the door shut, throwing the deadbolt so fast I nearly jammed it. Silence. For a second, I thought he was still there, standing just inches away. But then, I heard the porch creak, the slow, measured steps of someone retreating. I waited, barely breathing, until I heard nothing but the distant hum of cicadas outside. When I finally got the courage to peek through the window, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept going over every moment, every tiny thing that felt off. The way he knocked, the way he tested my responses, the way he smiled, but his eyes never matched. It wasn't until a week later that I saw the news. A composite sketch flashed across the screen, and my stomach dropped. It was him. His name was Derek Todd Lee. They were calling him the Baton Rouge serial killer. He had been breaking into women's homes, attacking them, killing them. And I had almost let him inside. To this day, I don't know what would have happened if my son hadn't come home at that exact moment. I don't like to think about it. I lock my doors now. This happened a few years ago, in the late 1990s. I was in my early 20s, and I had just started my first full-time job at a small marketing firm in a mid-sized town. My commute was fairly straightforward, a 30-minute drive, mostly along back roads. One evening, after a long day of work, I was on my way home, feeling exhausted but relieved the week was finally over. I stopped at a gas station about halfway between the office and my apartment. It wasn't a busy time, around 9:30 p.m., so the station was quiet, the kind of quiet where there's just one other person in the store, and the air smells like the combination of fresh gasoline and stale coffee. I've always been a bit of a night owl, so late-night drives didn't faze me. As I filled my tank, I noticed the cashier was busy chatting with a man who had just walked in. He looked a bit off, maybe in his late 30s, wearing a worn-out jacket and scruffy jeans. But I didn't pay much attention to him. I finished fueling, and I was about to head inside to grab a soda when I heard the man speak to the cashier. "Can you get me the key for the bathroom?" he asked. The cashier nodded, but then he added, "You know, it's kind of late, and I've got to lock up soon." The man gave a little chuckle. "I won't be long," he said, walking toward the back of the store. There was nothing particularly alarming about this exchange. It was just two guys talking, one needing to use the bathroom. But for some reason, I felt an odd unease in the pit of my stomach. I told myself it was just late-night nerves, nothing more. I turned around to head into the store to buy that soda. But that's when I noticed something strange. The man wasn't heading to the bathroom. Instead, he walked toward the exit, and then, as if he had changed his mind, he circled back. That's when I heard the faintest rustling sound from behind me. I turned to see the man standing a few feet away from the counter, staring at me with an unnerving intensity. I took a step back. "Are you all right?" I asked, forcing a calm voice even though every instinct in me was telling me to leave. The man didn't respond at first. Then, After a moment of silence, he just nodded slowly, as if he had just remembered something. "Yeah," he muttered, "just tired." I wasn't convinced. Something in his body language didn't sit right with me. He was pacing, his eyes darting around. I could feel the tension in the air, like something was about to happen. I paid for my soda quickly, turned around, and tried to leave as quickly as possible without being too obvious about it. But when I reached for the door, it wouldn't open. I tugged a few times, assuming maybe it was locked. Then I saw the man step toward the door behind me. I froze. He wasn't touching the door, but he was standing right behind me, so close that I could feel his presence. The chill down my spine turned into a wave of panic. I glanced over at the cashier, who was now watching the interaction closely. I remember the cashier making a subtle gesture with his hand, a small wave that felt like a signal for me to hurry up. I don't know if he had noticed something I hadn't, or if he had seen this man around before. Pushed the door again, harder this time, and it opened. I practically ran out of the gas station, my heart pounding in my chest. I quickly got into my car, locked the doors, and sped off. I looked in the rearview mirror as I drove away, half expecting to see the man following me. But there was nothing. It wasn't until I got home and had time to think about it that I realized just how close I had come to a dangerous situation. At night, I didn't sleep much. My mind kept replaying the moment in the gas station, the way the man had stood so close behind me. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. After all, the guy had never actually threatened me. He hadn't even said anything threatening. It was just his presence, the odd way he had been acting, that left me uneasy. But then I heard something on the local news that made my blood run cold. It was a report about a string of incidents at various gas stations in the area, somewhere between 2 or 3 other towns nearby. The police were investigating after several women had reported feeling harassed or followed by a man matching the same description. Early 30s, scruffy jacket, unkempt appearance. Some of the women said they felt like they were being watched. Others reported the man trying to get too close, or even following them to their cars. I stared at the TV screen, my heart racing. I quickly grabbed my phone, scrolling through the news website for more details. That's when I saw it. A chilling line at the bottom of the article. Suspect believed to be connected to at least 3 attempted assaults. Suddenly, everything clicked. That strange feeling I had at the gas station, the way the man was lingering just behind me. I wasn't being paranoid. He had been sizing me up, just like he had done with those other women. And if I hadn't acted fast, who knows what might have happened. I couldn't shake the image of his eyes, cold and calculating, as if he was waiting for the right moment. It felt like my close call had been more than just coincidence. I realized how easily things could have turned out differently, and the thought made my stomach churn. A few days later, the police announced they had arrested a suspect who fit the description. The man, whose name was Darren Smith, was linked to multiple reports of attempted assaults at gas stations around the area. They said he had been preying on women late at night, taking advantage of the quiet, low traffic hours to follow them and make them feel unsafe. His arrest came after a woman had bravely fought him off in a parking lot, and he was eventually apprehended. I felt a strange sense of relief, knowing that Darren Smith had been caught, but at the same time, it made everything feel too real. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I hadn't been aware of what was happening around me, if I had let my guard down for just a second, I might have been the one in the news story. I went to that gas station again about a week later, this time during the day. I didn't need gas, but I wanted to see it for myself, to stand there in the daylight and remind myself how easy it could be to miss the warning signs when you're not paying attention. I walked past the pumps. I looked up at the same spot where I had stood days before. I don't know why, but I expected to see the same man there, waiting. But the gas station was just like it had always been. Ordinary, quiet, safe. I haven't been back at night since, but I've never forgotten that feeling of being watched. Sometimes I still get a little uneasy walking through parking lots or near dark corners. It's been a while now, but I think about it often. How close I came to being another name on the list, another statistic in a police report. And how, in those moments of stillness, when we feel like nothing is wrong, danger can be lurking just out of sight. I don't know who else he might have targeted before being caught, but I'm thankful that I never had to find out the hard way. Let's not meet again, Darren. This happened a few years ago, and to this day, I still don't know what would have happened if I had made a different choice. I was driving home late at night, taking the back roads to my small town like I always did. It was a quiet drive. No other cars, no streetlights, just my high beams cutting through the dark. I liked the silence. It made the long days feel a little less stressful. But that night, something felt off. About halfway home, I rounded a bend and slammed on my brakes. A tree was blocking the road. A big one. Too thick to drive over, too long to go around. I sat there for a second, gripping the wheel. There hadn't been any storms, no strong winds. So how the hell did it end up here? I reached for my phone. No signal. Not surprising. This road barely got service during the day. I could turn around and take the long way home, but that would add another hour to my drive. I sighed, turned on my hazards, and stepped out. The air was cool, the night dead silent. No wind, no crickets. Just the sound of my footsteps on the pavement. I put my hands on the log, trying to push it, but it barely moved. Way too heavy. I was debating whether to try again or just give up when I heard it. A voice. Faint. Coming from the woods to my left. Help me. I froze. It was a man's voice, weak, like he was hurt. Please, help. I turned toward the trees, squinting into the dark. Hello. No response. I swallowed, glancing back at my car. Everything in me said get back inside. But what if someone was actually hurt? What if they'd crashed or gotten lost out here? Help. It was closer now. Too close. That's when I noticed something. The tree. It didn't look like it had just fallen. The edges were too clean, like it had been cut. A bad feeling crept up my spine. I took a step back toward my car. My heart was pounding. Then I heard it. A footstep. Behind me. I turned, and for a split second, in the edge of my headlights, I saw movement. Someone was there. And they weren't calling for help. I didn't think. I bolted for my car, yanking the door open just as I heard rushing footsteps. I slammed the door shut and hit the lock button. For a second, nothing happened. Just me, panting in my seat, my headlights illuminating the empty road. Then, a hand slammed against the driver's side window. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body locked up, every muscle frozen as I stared at the hand pressed against my window. It was pale, dirty, fingers spread wide. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. I fumbled for the ignition, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my keys. The sound of my own breathing filled the car, loud and uneven. Outside, there was nothing. No movement, no sound. I slammed the car into reverse, tires skidding as I backed up fast, my headlights swinging wildly across the trees. I kept expecting to see something, someone, in the beams. But the road was empty. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just kept reversing until I could make a 3-point turn, tires screeching as I floored it back the way I came. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel, my pulse hammering in my ears. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see a figure standing in the road, watching me leave. But there was nothing. By the time I made it back to town, I was shaking so badly I had to pull over. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to process what had just happened. Had someone set up that roadblock, trying to make someone stop? Was it a carjacking? A robbery? Something worse? I don't know. But I do know one thing. If I had hesitated even a second longer, I don't think I would have made it out of there. I was 12 the summer my parents sent me to a week-long sleepaway camp deep in the woods of northern Pennsylvania. It was my first time away from home for more than a night, and I was equal parts nervous and excited. The camp itself was pretty basic. Cabins, a mess hall, a lake for swimming, but for some reason, our group was assigned lean-tos instead of actual cabins. If you've never seen one, a lean-to is basically a 3-sided wooden shelter with an open front. They weren't much protection from the elements, and, as I quickly realized, they didn't offer much protection from anything else either. The first few days were fun. We hiked, swam, and sat around the campfire listening to ghost stories that the counselors swore were true. I didn't believe them. I wish I could say the same about what happened next. It was our 4th night there. I woke up to the sound of twigs snapping. At first, I thought it was an animal. There were plenty of deer, and we'd even seen a black bear rummaging through the trash bins behind the mess hall earlier that day. But this was different. The footsteps were too steady, too deliberate. I turned over in my sleeping bag and squinted into the dark. The fire had burned down to embers, casting just enough of a glow to see the trees lining the clearing. That's when I saw him. A man, standing just beyond the firelight. He wasn't moving, just standing there between the trees, watching. His clothes looked dark and ragged, and even from a distance I could tell something was off. I froze. My brain struggled to make sense of it. Was it a counselor? A late arrival? Someone playing a prank? Then he took a step closer. I jolted upright, my heart hammering in my chest. "Hey," I whispered harshly, shaking my friend Matt beside me. He groaned, but didn't wake up. I looked back. The man was still there, still watching. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. Click. The beam cut through the darkness, hitting the spot where he had been. But he was gone. I stared for what felt like forever, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I had. Maybe my brain was still wired from the ghost stories earlier. I eventually lay back down, but sleep never came. Every rustling leaf, every distant crack of a branch had me wide-eyed and gripping my flashlight like a lifeline. By morning, I convinced myself it had been a trick of the light. A shadow. Nothing. I wish that were true. Because by the next night, we'd find out I wasn't imagining things. The next morning, I told the counselors what I saw. I expected them to take it seriously. After all, we were kids sleeping in open shelters in the middle of the woods. But instead, they laughed it off. It was probably a deer, one of them said. Or maybe Bigfoot, another joked, nudging my shoulder. Even my friends didn't believe me. Matt said I must have been dreaming. The other guys started making up stories about the ghost of Camp Wrenwood, turning it into a joke before breakfast was even over. I wanted to let it go. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen something real, something dangerous. That night, I stayed awake longer than usual, listening. The fire crackled, the wind moved through the trees, and eventually, the sound of my bunkmates' breathing settled into a slow rhythm as they drifted off to sleep. And then, a branch snapped. I felt my stomach drop, turned toward the tree line, barely breathing. My flashlight was in my hand, but I hesitated to turn it on. What if I saw him again? Seconds passed. Then a minute. Nothing. I started to think maybe it had just been my imagination. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, closer. My fingers fumbled over the switch of my flashlight. I braced myself, clicked it on, and a scream. Not mine, one of the girls from the other lean-to. A counselor's voice shouted in the distance, and suddenly, the whole camp was awake. I shot up as Matt and the others stirred beside me. We grabbed our flashlights and ran toward the noise, beams of light cutting through the darkness. The girls' lean-to was about 30 yards away, and by the time we got there, they were huddled together, eyes wide with fear. He was here, one of them cried, right outside. A counselor knelt beside them, trying to soothe them, while another swept the woods with a flashlight. Who? They asked gently. The man. My stomach dropped. More counselors arrived, murmuring to each other. One of them clutched a walkie-talkie, speaking in hushed tones. Then, in the distance, sirens. They gathered us all in the mess hall while the adults sorted things out. Everyone was talking at once, trying to make sense of what had happened. The girls insisted they had seen someone moving between the trees, closer than before. One of them had even woken up to find him just a few feet away. The air felt heavy, charged with nervous energy. Whatever had happened, it wasn't just a campfire story anymore. That was when she screamed. An hour later, the head counselor made an announcement. "There's nothing to worry about," she said. "The police are checking the area, but you're all safe. It was probably just a drifter passing through." But she looked nervous. The next morning, they ended camp early. Parents were called. Bags were packed. No real explanation was given, just that they thought it was best to cut the trip short. I didn't find out the truth until weeks later. My mom was watching the news when I walked into the room. I wasn't paying attention until I caught a glimpse of a photo on the screen. A man's face. His mugshot. Escaped from a minimum security prison late last week, the anchor reported. Authorities say he had been on the run for several days before finally being spotted near a campground in northern Pennsylvania. My stomach tightened. They caught him, miles away from where we had been. But for at least one night he had been there, in the woods, watching. I don't know what he wanted. I don't know what would have happened if the girls hadn't woken up. But I do know one thing. That first night, when I saw him, he saw me too. I used to work the graveyard shift at a 24-hour grocery store. Most nights were quiet, just stocking shelves, cleaning up spills, and occasionally dealing with a tipsy customer after the bars closed. It wasn't exactly exciting, but it was predictable, except for one night. It was a Tuesday around 2:30 a.m., and the store was nearly empty. My coworker, James, was in the back unloading a shipment, leaving me alone on the floor. The only customer was a man in a hooded jacket, moving slowly through the aisles. Nothing too strange about that. We got plenty of late-night wanderers. But something about him felt off. He wasn't browsing. He wasn't picking anything up. He was just moving, up and down the aisles, slow and deliberate. Every time I looked up from my work, he seemed a little closer. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Still, I decided to walk the store, just to make it seem like I was busy. That's when I realized he wasn't alone. The far end of the store, near the refrigerated section, was another man. Same build, same hooded jacket, standing perfectly still, facing away from me. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I made my way to the back room and found James. "Hey man, see those two guys out there?" I asked. He frowned. "Two," I nodded. "They're not shopping, just lurking." James sighed, set down his box cutter, and followed me to the doorway. He peered out for a second, then shook his head. "I only see one guy," I looked. The man near the refrigerators was gone. Maybe I was wrong, I mumbled, but I didn't believe it. James shrugged. "If they're just wandering around, don't worry about it. They'll leave eventually." I tried to shake it off and went back to work, but I couldn't focus. The man in the hood was still there, pacing the aisles, watching. I told myself I'd feel better if I confronted him. Not aggressively, just a casual, "Hey, need help finding something?" I found him in aisle 7. He stood completely still, staring at the shelves. As I walked closer, I noticed his hands were clenched into fists. Something about it made me uneasy. "Hey man, you finding everything okay?" I asked, keeping my voice light, trying not to let my nerves show. He didn't move, didn't answer, just stood there, his breathing slow and heavy. A knot tightened in my stomach. "Sir?" Then, without warning, he turned and stepped toward me. I barely had time to react. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he was charging at me. I stumbled back, throwing my hands up, but he was fast, faster than I expected. His shoulder slammed into me, knocking me hard against the shelves. Boxes tumbled down around us as I tried to regain my footing. "Hey, what the hell?" He didn't say a word, just swung. I ducked. His fist clipped my shoulder, sending a sharp pain down my arm. I turned and ran, heart pounding, my mind racing. Was he robbing the place? High on something? Just insane? I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I sprinted toward the back room, where James was. I made it past the registers, nearly slipping on the freshly mopped floor, when I heard footsteps behind me. He was chasing me. I threw myself at the back room door, slamming it open. "James, call the cops." He barely had time to look up before the guy hit the door behind me. Hard. The metal rattled in its frame as James scrambled for his phone. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a box cutter from the supply shelf, and turned to face the door. Silence. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and uneven. James was already on the phone, his voice sharp with urgency. Then, a slow creak. The door wasn't locked, and he was pushing it open. I gripped the box cutter so tight. "Get the hell out of here, man," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The door opened just a crack, enough for me to see his face, and that's when I realized something. I'd seen him before, not in the store, not around town, but on the news. A few weeks ago, there had been an attack in a parking garage. Random, brutal, without clear motive. The description had been vague, but the hoodie, the build, the empty look in his eyes, I had a feeling. It was him. Before I could say a word, he turned and bolted. By the time the cops arrived, he was long gone. They checked the security footage, took my statement, and assured me they'd look into it. But the way they said it made it clear. They didn't expect much. I never saw him again. But every time I worked the late shift after that, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might come back. That may be. Next time. I wouldn't be so lucky.
They say every small town's got one. A place that shouldn't still be open after dark. For us, that place was Randall's Pump and Diner, sitting on the far end of Route 47. The kind of place truckers stop at for burnt coffee, where the jukebox only plays sad songs and the neon "Open 24 Hours" sign buzzes like a hornet trapped behind glass. Evening, welcome to Randall's. Coffee's fresh, or at least newer than I am. That's Marcus Bell, the only one foolish enough to take the graveyard shift. He's 27, works 2 jobs, and says he doesn't believe in ghosts. Not the human kind, anyway. Most nights were quiet. A few long-haul drivers, the occasional local who'd had one too many at the bar down the road. But tonight was different. It started when the power flickered around 2 a.m. The diner went black for half a second and came back. That was nothing new. But the security camera in the back room, it didn't come back on. Trish, you there? You see anything on your monitor?
Static. Everything's static. Maybe the fuse tripped.
Trish was the cook. Old, tough as nails, always smelled faintly of cigarettes and bacon grease. She'd seen it all, but the way her voice wavered told Marcus this was different. He went to the back room to check the fuse box, flashlight in hand. The air felt colder, like the fridge door had been left open. And then he saw it. Something on the monitor that shouldn't have been there. A man standing by pump number 3, still as a photograph. Great, another drunk hitchhiker. Marcus stepped outside. The lot was empty except for his reflection in the glass door. No man, no car. He looked toward pump 3. Nothing. Then the pump clicked, and from somewhere behind the sign, a voice, low and drawn out like. It had traveled a long way just to speak his name. Marcus. What's there? You need gas or something? He shined a flashlight toward the sound, caught a glimpse of a figure stepping just out of sight, behind the ice chest. He followed, muttering under his breath about trespassers, but when he turned the corner, the man was gone. Only a set of wet footprints led back toward the diner door. Inside, Trish was gone. The coffee pot was on the floor, still steaming, and on a counter beside the register, someone had left a gas receipt, printed with a timestamp that hadn't happened yet. At 3:17 a.m., that's 10 minutes from now, and right below that, in the spot where a customer's name usually printed, it just said one word. Run. Marcus stared at the receipt like it was a riddle written in blood. 3:17 a.m. Run. His watch said 3:08. 9 minutes. He tried to laugh it off, the way people do when they don't want to admit fear's got its fingers around their throat. Cute. Real cute. Trish, she's messing with me again? The air was wrong. Heavy, like the diner itself was holding its breath. The security camera still hissed with static, but now, between bursts of smoke, a shape flickered on the screen. It looked like Trish, except she was standing outside, and she was facing the wall. Trish, come on, you're freaking me out here.
Marcus. He's not gone, Marcus.
He froze. The voice wasn't coming from the intercom. It came from the freezer door. He turned, slow, heart thumping like a bad drum beat. On the metal door, fog. Like someone had pressed their face against the inside, exhaled, and drawn something into the mist. Not a word. Just 3 finger lines, a crude triangle, and in the center, a single eye. What the hell? 3:14. Outside, the pumps all clicked on at once. Every nozzle, every handle. Gas spilling like rain on the concrete. And then, the smell changed. Not fuel, something older, metallic, sharp. Marcus grabbed the fire extinguisher, shoved open the door, and ran out into the storm. But the rain wasn't rain anymore. Whispering, voices layered. Marcus, Randall, still open, still open. He spun around. No cars, no people, no lights down the highway, just the glow from pump 3. And that same man, soaked through, face hidden under his hood, standing perfectly still beside it. Hey, you, what do you want? When the flash faded, the man was gone. And in his place, Trish's name tag. Bent, burned, still warm to the touch. Marcus ran back inside. The clock up of the grill clicked to 3:17. The receipt printer started spitting out paper again, line after line, each one with the same single word. Run. 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 Marcus didn't need another warning. He grabbed his keys, bolted out the back door, and never looked back. They found his car 2 miles down the highway the next morning. Empty. Engine still warm. Driver's seat soaked in something that wasn't gas. And Randall's Pumpin' Diner? It burned down 3 days later. Nobody knows how it started, but folks driving past still swear they see the sign flicker on around 3:17. coffee's still hot, they say, if you're brave enough to stop.
On a chilling Halloween night, I was a curious 11 or 12-year-old, deep into my video game on the Nintendo Switch with headphones plugged in. The clock had struck midnight when I decided to quench my thirst by grabbing some water from the outdoor fridge in the garage. What's essential to mention is that my parents had their friends staying in a trailer parked outside. To ensure easy access to the garage, the door remained unlocked just in case they needed something in the middle of the night. As I stepped out of my room, headphones still firmly in place, I had my gaming console in hand. But right before reaching the garage door, for some unexplained reason, I decided to switch it off and remove my headphones. It wasn't a typical action for someone my age. But little did I know it would be the decision that might have saved me that night. As I laid my hand on the garage door handle, my ears free of headphones, a deafening crash echoed from within the garage. A paralyzing chill swept over me, and it felt as if my entire body was composed of static. I didn't freeze, though. Instead, I calmly checked the door handle by turning it slowly, avoiding any unnecessary noise. And to my dismay, it was unlocked. In a split second, I locked it firmly. However, as I did so, the door handle started to turn, rattling rapidly 4 times, as if someone was desperately trying to get inside. My heart raced, and I bolted to my parents' room, rapping on their door with all the urgency I could muster. Their sleepy voices muffled by the door. They inquired what was wrong. "Please tell me one of you is outside in the garage," I pleaded. My dad's reply sent shivers down my spine as he said no. After recounting the harrowing encounter, my dad tried to reassure me, suggesting it was probably their friends attempting to enter. He advised me to unlock the door, and I, believing him, cautiously ventured outside, clutching a kitchen knife, courtesy of my fascination with horror stories. The next morning, my parents decided to double-check with their friends about the incident. To our astonishment, not only had they heard a stumbling noise outside their trailer, but they also distinctly remembered hearing a whispered expletive. To add to the eerie revelations, none of them had left the trailer that night. It became apparent that my swift reaction had not only stopped a potential intruder, but had also sent them scurrying away. As a result of that spine-tingling Halloween night, the door remained securely locked at all times during the dark hours, a chilling reminder of the malevolent presence that once lurked just beyond it. Welcome, brave souls, to survival horror ambience. Prepare to journey into the realm of the unknown, where chilling tales and spine-tingling mysteries await. We invite you to step into the shadows, where fear and suspense reign supreme.
A tale unfurled that could have emerged from the twisted imagination of Stephen King himself. I was a child of 7, nestled within the confines of our 2-story box house, a setting ripe for the bizarre events that were to transpire. Accompanying me were my 2 older sisters, aged 8 and 11, along with a pair of cousins, each at the tender age of 7 or 8. A quintet of young souls, all girls, left to their own devices in that creaking abode. It was the solemn duty of my eldest sister to watch over us 4 younger ones. To paint a vivid picture of the scene, one must envision our house, a mundane structure with a flat roof and a similarly styled small porch projecting from the front. This seemingly ordinary backdrop would soon become the stage for an unnerving drama. As the day meandered on, our juvenile diversions were intermittently interrupted by an unsettling symphony of sounds emanating from above, footsteps, and the disconcerting clatter resembling pebbles cascading down the downspouts. The rationale of youth led us to attribute these dissonances to harmless creatures, perhaps squirrels or their ilk. But persistence fostered suspicion, and soon my elder sister conjectured a chilling notion. What if someone had scaled the massive tree adjacent to our dwelling, creeping onto the roof? Fear bubbled within our collective hearts, for we were aware of a point of entry on that rooftop accessible via a bedroom we shared. Unease now gripped us like a vice. To ascertain the truth, my elder sister instructed our cousins and one of my sisters to make a treacherous journey across an empty gravel expanse to the nearby corner store. The mission, peer upward on their return and confirm or dispel our mounting dread. And so, these intrepid young souls, scarcely past their 8th year, embarked on their mission. Midway through the barren lot, their curiosity impelled them to cast their gaze skyward. The sight that met their eyes was straight out of an 80s horror flick, akin to Johnny Depp's demeanor in A Nightmare on Elm Street, a man clad in an audaciously cropped football jersey, an embodiment of retro eccentricity, hunkered down on our very roof. A tumultuous eruption of panic carried them back to our sanctuary, where breathless and terrified, they relayed the bizarre apparition. In a state of near hysteria, my elder sister sought solace in our neighbor's deck, hoping to gain a vantage point from which to corroborate or discredit this macabre account. Alas, the rooftop's configuration thwarted her efforts, obscuring any sign of the unwelcome visitor. Summoning law enforcement was the next logical step. Temporal distortion seemed to take hold as the minutes stretched on, transforming into an agonizing eternity before the police arrived. Their entrance was marked by a palpable skepticism, dismissing our claims as mere childish fantasies crafted for attention. One officer embarked on a reconnaissance mission, driving to a vantage point uphill, a block away. Alas, the peculiar geometry of the rooftop denied any line of sight to a prone figure. And so, the onus was shifted back to us, 5 young souls, trembling and tearful, beseeched to search every nook and cranny of our own home. The specter of that potential intruder loomed large, his possible ingress haunting our every step. As if trapped in a living nightmare, we embarked on this terrifying mission. Our trembling hands and tear-filled eyes cast over corners and closets, but how keen can the vision of youth truly be? The officers departed without thorough investigation, leaving us alone in a house now infused with an unsettling dread. The unknown lingered. Was he lurking, concealed within, or had he vanished into the night? Hours elapsed before my mother finally returned, her presence a balm to our frayed nerves. We recounted the nightmarish sequence, only to be met by reassurances that the rooftop access was secured by a lock, an assertion confirmed by her subsequent investigation. The exterior, however, bore the damning evidence of our veracity. Footprints marred the earth, testimony to the man's descent from our rooftop sanctuary down the porch and into the flower beds below. My mother, a tempest of rage and disbelief, stormed to the local police station the following day. Each of us was subjected to interrogation. The consistency of our testimonies a testament to the truth of our words. The brass, however, remained unmoved, their skepticism unyielding in the face of innocence. The identity of that mysterious intruder, his purpose, and his knowledge of our juvenile isolation remained forever locked in the enigmatic folds of the 80s night. And thus, like a tale spun from the masterful pen of Stephen King, our narrative ended in unsettling uncertainty, the rooftops and shadows forever holding their secrets.
Our parents ventured out for a swift grocery errand. As the familiar hum of the car faded down the driveway, a text from my mother chimed in, bearing an unsettling message. The contents painted a strange portrait of our elderly neighbor, perched on his driveway as if in vigilant observation of the neighborhood. My heart raced as her words instructed me to secure the front door, an injunction I adhered to without hesitation. Accompanying this act, I discreetly pocketed a pocket knife for added reassurance. In the dimly lit living room, my sister and I sought refuge, engrossed in a television show. Yet the serenity was shattered by an unexpected knock on the door. Instinct propelled me to act swiftly. I herded my sister into the basement, urging her to remain there while I dealt with the enigmatic visitor. With an interior door equipped with a window, I strained to discern the figure on the other side. A man or woman, the details obscured by the glass, yet apprehension gnawed at me. Men were a rarity in our quiet neighborhood, and their disposition was anything but amiable. A surge of anxiety coursed through me, amplifying my fear as I contemplated the presence outside. If my absence extended beyond 30 minutes, I instructed my sister to contact the authorities and seek refuge with a neighbor until our parents returned. The door creaked open, revealing the visitor, none other than our unsettling neighbor, his request bordering on the bizarre. A peculiar mix of dread and relief intertwined as he implored me to join him outside. Supposedly, he sought an audience with my parents, but as they were absent, he insisted on conversing with me. With trepidation gripping me, I refused his request, a resolute no escaping my lips. His insistence persisted, urging me to accompany him at that very moment. His rationale was grounded in my parents' absence, requiring him to relay his matters to me instead. Skepticism wrestled with my fear, and in a moment of vulnerability, I allowed myself to entertain this unlikely scenario. The inexplicable beckoning led me to follow him, trailing him towards his abode. A reckless impulse drove me, a faint comfort stemming from the pocketed knife that bolstered my confidence. His journey brought me to his meticulously kept lawn, a canvas of grass that he guarded fervently. In his stern gaze, I detected the solemnity he attributed to his grass, his surveillance encompassing even the minutest of trespasses. With a gravitas matched only by his overgrown lawn, he gestured toward patches of withered grass. A revelation spilled from his lips, accusations directed at our cats. These alleged culprits had purportedly visited his yard, wreaking havoc on his precious grass. A surge of relief washed over me as his grievance shifted from potential harm to the innocuous habits of our feline companions. With measured words, I conveyed the truth. Our cats never set paws outside our sanctuary. A well-timed fabrication concealed their occasional backyard escapades. Returning home, my parents received my account, and they too were baffled by the strange events. As days unfolded, the neighbor's unease grew, prompting him to summon the police on multiple occasions. Regrettably, for him, the authorities remained powerless to intervene. The strangest twist in this peculiar narrative lay in the fact that the cats he perceived as the malefactors were not even ours, but rather a band of wandering strays. In retrospect, the memory of that night carries an eerie blend of the bizarre and the ordinary, a tale that unraveled within the shadows of a suburban enclave.
Thank you for embarking on this eerie journey with us through the corridors of fear and paranoia. If you've been entranced by these tales of the unexplained, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay tuned for more spine-chilling stories. And remember, in the world of survival horror ambience, even the most ordinary places can conceal the darkest secrets. In the next story, a woman's Thanksgiving took a creepy turn on a dark country road, and we'll call this story Dead End.
I'm a 30-year-old female and a nursing student, and this unsettling incident happened during Thanksgiving 2020. The day started off on a high note as I passed an exam with a score of 86. I then spent pre-Thanksgiving with my boyfriend and his family. However, my boyfriend had to leave for a Cal Fire base on the night before Thanksgiving, so I spent that evening at my brother's house. I decided to head home around 8 p.m. I was tired but felt a surge of energy, perhaps due to my somewhat manic mental state. In this state, I decided to surprise my sister with a gift for her and her kids, as she hadn't responded to my messages. I made my way to her house, and the day turned out to be filled with fun, food, drinks, and dancing. Around 6 p.m., I started planning my trip to leave my boyfriend's temporary home. We had a bit of an argument as I told him I'd start my 3-hour drive around 1 a.m. He was a bit nervous about my journey. However, we eventually reached an agreement on my departure time. The festivities continued at my sister's house, with alcohol, fun, Thanksgiving celebrations, family pictures, and more food. I decided to take a nap, but due to my manic state, I also wanted to shower and fix my hair. This delayed my nap, and I ended up lying down around midnight. I set an alarm for 1 a.m., but I ended up sleeping through it. My sister, who asked me why I hadn't left yet, I rushed out of her house, but left my phone behind. Once I had my phone, I set out on my journey again. However, I took a wrong turn due to mixing up 2 cities with similar names, both starting with H. Once I corrected my route, I was on my way. The first hour of the drive was a bit frustrating, and at one point I thought I had left my vape pens behind as my sister had mentioned it. I later found the vape pens in my purse, which was a relief. As I left the city limits of Sacramento, I found myself in a race with a lifted Silverado. My competitive spirit got the better of me, and I decided to join the race. We reached speeds of up to 120 miles per hour for about 10 minutes before I realized it wasn't worth the risk of getting a ticket. After the Silverado took an exit, it was just me and another driver in a dark, rural area. The other driver seemed to be closely following my car, and my focus was on making it safely rather than on the car beside me. We reached a small town where we had to travel through a few miles on a major street, going through stoplights. At one point, I felt annoyed by how close the other driver was to my car. However, after a few lights, the driver turned off, and I felt a bit childish for being bothered by it. But my sense of unease returned when, a few lights later, I noticed the same car had returned to the main street. It was the only other car on the road and seemed to be purposefully staying on my right side. My fear began to build, and I hesitated to call my boyfriend as I wondered if I was just being paranoid. I had driven alone for long distances at night before, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As we approached a traffic light, my brain went into overdrive, and I decided to stay calm. However, as the light changed, I stayed put, and the other car didn't move either. When I finally glanced to my right, I could see the silhouette of a person's face under a hat staring at me. My heart raced, and I decided to drive through the intersection slowly, maintaining my composure. The other driver's car remained still, and a car behind us honked impatiently. It was then that I noticed a truck in the distance approaching the last traffic light on the one-lane road. I accelerated to reach the light, but the other driver matched my speed. Panicked, I veered to the left into oncoming traffic to get around the truck. My rationalization was to speed up and take my chances with the police if necessary. The other driver followed suit, dangerously weaving between lanes. Even as I sped up to 120 miles per hour, the other car stayed close behind. After about 10 minutes, I began to slow down, eventually reaching 80 miles per hour and then 65 miles per hour. I finally stopped at a store with many customers to ensure my safety. I entered the store, visibly shaken and struggling to pay for my coffee and cigarettes due to my trembling hands. The sun was rising and I was almost at my destination. I was still shaking and had a persistent headache. When I reached my boyfriend's place, he sensed something was wrong. I explained the terrifying experience to him, and although he was upset, he provided comfort and insisted I avoid late-night drives from then on. This incident served as a stark reminder that no one, regardless of gender, should think it's okay to drive alone into rural areas at night.
Halloween night had finally arrived and the air was electric with anticipation. I was part of a group of friends who had eagerly awaited this night for weeks. There was a famous haunted house in our town, and it was the main event. All my friends were eager to go, and I was determined to impress them. This haunted house had a reputation for being more terrifying than any other, and I couldn't resist the challenge. Dressed in our scariest costumes, we piled into a car and set out for the haunted house. As we pulled into the parking lot, the authenticity of the place was immediately striking. It resembled a grand, decaying mansion that had been abandoned for years. Fake blood was splattered all over the walls. Bloody handprints adorned the cracked and chipped glass windows, and oversized fake cobwebs with gigantic spiders clung to every available surface. In a hidden corner, a body bag lay in a pool of fake blood, creating a spine-chilling tableau. It was deeply unsettling. "Wow, they've really outdone themselves," one of my friends remarked, their voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. We approached the entrance, and it was evident that the creators had spared no expense in creating a terrifying atmosphere. Fake severed bodies were strewn about, surrounded by ominous props such as bloodied weapons, axes, enormous knives, and chainsaws, all adorned with bits of fake guts. A fog machine filled the air with a thick white mist, which clung to our costumes. Overhead, strobe lights flickered, casting eerie shadows and adding to the sense of foreboding. As we ventured deeper into the haunted house, we encountered a series of terrifying scenes. In the dining room, zombie animatronics sat at a table. Their gauntlets filled with blood and organs spread across the plates. A dismembered man animatronic sprawled across the center of the table, its expression one of sheer horror with wide, screaming eyes. Despite my best efforts to appear brave in front of my friends, I couldn't help but feel genuinely spooked by the gruesome sights. Our journey through the haunted house continued, and we soon found ourselves in a section filled with scare actors dressed as infamous serial killers. Among them was an actor dressed as Michael Myers, standing in a dark hallway, partially concealed by the wall, clutching a hyper-realistic, bloody machete. His mask was unsettlingly accurate, and his menacing presence made my heart skip a beat. I was the first to spot him and brought him to my friend's attention, resulting in playful screams and nervous laughter. "Dude, that's creepy as hell," one of my friends said, staring at the Michael Myers actor. "I can't believe how real that machete looks." "Yeah, it's like he stepped right out of the movie," another friend added, still eyeing the sinister figure. We laughed off our unease, but the actor's realistic portrayal left an indelible mark on our psyches. Hours passed as we navigated the labyrinthine haunted house, but eventually, the thrills began to wane. It was time to call it a night. We made our way back to my house to relax and wind down. Inside the cozy confines of my home, we settled into our favorite group activity, attempting to shake off the lingering unease from the haunted house. "I swear, that Michael Myers guy gave me the creeps," one of my friends confessed. "I know what you mean," I replied. They really nailed the authenticity in there. As the evening wore on, my friends decided it was time to head home. I bid them farewell, and one by one they left my house until I was alone. I retreated to my room, wanting to relax until I fell asleep. I put on some YouTube videos, the soft glow of the screen filling the room, and soon I began to nod off. But just as I was drifting into slumber, the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. Panic and confusion washed over me as I shot up in bed. It took a moment for the reality of the situation to sink in. The shattering glass was real. I always kept a baseball bat within reach just in case. I grabbed it and, with trembling hands, began to creep out of my room, determined to investigate the noise. In the living room, I discovered a large glass window shattered, with shards of broken glass glistening like malevolent diamonds on the floor. It was a warm, breezy night, ruling out the possibility of an accidental breakage. Fear gripped me as the realization hit. Someone was in my house. I tightened my grip on the bat, my breath coming in heavy, uneven gasps. My heart raced as I heard faint but unmistakable thuds coming from my bedroom. Whoever it was, they were looking for me, and a gut feeling told me their intentions weren't benign. The heavy footsteps grew closer, and I found myself frozen in fear, unable to do anything but stand there, trembling with terror. The footsteps suddenly stopped, and the house fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets outside. Then, I felt the cold, menacing touch of metal against my neck. A huge machete pressed threateningly against my throat. I could hear heavy breathing from behind, and the terror that had gripped me throughout the night reached its peak. My mind raced as the seconds felt like hours. I could feel the weight of the machete against my throat, and cold sweat began to trickle down my back. With my heart pounding in my chest, I couldn't bring myself to move or even breathe too loudly. The intruder behind me seemed to enjoy my fear, letting out a low, eerie chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. "I bet you thought you were safe," a voice thick with malice whispered in my ear. My mind scrambled for a response, for some way to escape this nightmare. "What do you want?" I stammered, my voice trembling. The machete pressed harder against my throat in response, causing me to wince. "That's not important right now. What's important is what you're going to do for me." Fear coursed through my veins, but I managed to croak, "What do you mean?" The intruder leaned in closer, their hot, rancid breath against my ear. You're going to do exactly as I say, or things will get very messy, very fast. My heart raced even faster, and I couldn't fathom what this person had in mind. Just tell me what you want, and maybe we can figure something out, I pleaded, desperate to avoid the impending danger. A sinister smile crossed the intruder's lips, even though I couldn't see their face. Good. That's the spirit I was hoping for. First, I need you to lead me to something. My mind raced, trying to figure out a way to stall, to find an opening for escape, or to signal for help. What do you need me to show you? Your friends, the voice hissed. Take me to them. Panic surged through me. I couldn't lead this person to my friends. I had to protect them. I can't do that, I said, my voice growing stronger with determination. The machete pushed harder, drawing a thin bead of blood from my neck. You don't have a choice. Lead me to your friends, or I'll make this night unforgettable in the worst way. I couldn't bear the thought of leading the sinister intruder to my friends, and I knew I had to stall for time. Okay, just let me get dressed. The pressure on my throat eased, and I heard the intruder retreat slightly. They continued to watch me closely, and I knew I had to seize any opportunity for escape. Slowly, I reached for my phone, which was on the nightstand. As I pretended to fumble with my clothes, I discreetly sent a text to one of my friends, alerting them to the danger in my house. I had to hope they'd get the message in time. The intruder seemed to buy my act, and I could sense their impatience. Hurry up. We don't have all night. I nodded, quickly texting another friend, then a third, doing my best to convey the urgency without raising suspicion. I'm almost ready, I said, forcing myself to move toward the closet to grab some clothes. The voice grew more agitated. Hurry, or I'll make your little friend suffer. I knew my time was running out, and I had to make a split. Second decision. I lunged for the baseball bat that leaned against the closet door. With all my strength, I swung it in the direction of the intruder, connecting with a solid thud. The intruder let out a guttural scream, and the machete clattered to the ground as they stumbled backward. I took my chance and bolted for the door, frantically dialing 911 as I sprinted. The operator answered, and I breathlessly explained the situation, giving them my address. I was met with reassurances and instructions to stay on the line. As I reached the front door, the intruder began to recover. I could hear their enraged screams from behind me, but I didn't dare look back. The police would be on their way, and all I had to do was stay safe until they arrived. I flung open the front door, taking refuge on the porch and watching the flashing lights of the approaching police cars. It was a long, agonizing wait, but the authorities eventually arrived and apprehended the intruder. As they were led away in handcuffs, I finally exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The nightmare was over, thanks to quick thinking and a little help from my friends and the authorities. Halloween had taken a terrifying turn, but it was a night I would never forget, a night when fear had met its match in determination and resourcefulness. I had a rather strange camping experience in the lesser-known wilderness of East Tennessee. The campsite in question was a bit off the grid, not very well marked, and it was located near a creek. This secluded spot offered limited campsites, with one on the right side and a string of around 4 campsites on the left, following the course of the creek. The road was situated on higher ground, and one had to make their way down a hill on either side to access the campsites. The peculiar incident occurred around 1:30, when 2 substantial pickup trucks pulled up and set up at the first campsite on the left side, directly across from where my friends and I were camped. We couldn't help but find it bizarre that these individuals had arrived so late at night. After unloading their gear, they proceeded to build a substantial fire, which lit up their entire area. What struck us as even more unusual was the presence of exceptionally bright lights, which cast an eerie glow over their campsite. Adding to the mystery, they had set up a small, tall tent, one that might be used as a pop-up changing or privacy room. This was where things took an odd turn, and I should note that alcohol was involved, which might have affected my memory. I distinctly remember that the individuals at the campsite appeared to be wearing some sort of peculiar attire, robes, jackets, or other clothing that seemed to hold some significance. The color, from what I can recall, was possibly purple or dark blue. They were constantly moving in and out of the tent, while the others remained active around the fire. My friends and I couldn't resist periodically peeking over to observe what they were up to. Their actions had a certain